So our conversation with Bob Manzi, District Attorney for Indiana County, is brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Mr. DA, good morning.
Good morning, Todd. How are you today?
Wonderful. It's good to have you with us here today. Wanted to get you on and talk a little bit about the year that has been, and an announcement you put out just a couple of moments ago is something that in one sense, it's unfortunate we have to deal with things like this. In another sense, it's very fortunate we have people who are willing to do it. There were a number of these sorts of announcements in the past year, a multi-agency investigation, and it leads to a drug bust, in this case in Indiana Borough. That happened across the county this year, and so your first year in office was a very busy one, wasn't it?
It was a very busy one. We hit the ground running on January 6th of last year. Here we are a year and about a week later, and we're continuing to run hard.
One of the interesting things about it, this release this morning about the drug bust in Indiana Borough, that really illustrates it, is the fact that it's more than just the district attorney's office. It's more than just the police agency. It's more than just the courts. It really is a whole legal process, and therefore it requires a lot of different teams, and yours is a key part of it all.
Teamwork is very important when it comes to these matters. There is no I in which agency gets credit. I mean, quite frankly, every good investigation that is comes about because more than one person's involved. Our investigations under the Drug Task Force typically involve 4 or 5 different agencies in a particular case, and more often than not, there's even more agencies on a state or federal level that we're able to coordinate our efforts to bring about some really solid cases.
Yeah, that's another good point, is that you're dealing with the state and federal agencies as well when you're doing this job. So about that first year in office, what were some of the highlights for you? What were some of the things that, I don't know that they opened your eyes, but certainly would open ours?
Well, I think one of the key compartments of my first year is I wanted to have a more aggressive take with the Drug Task Force. We have the state police and their vice unit and the various police departments, and then we have this Drug Task Force that, with limited resources, we're able to target investigation towards some significant drug dealers. If we're able to go out there and identify who the mid-level and who the high-level drug dealers are, we're able to target investigations towards them, turn some small cases where a defendant has a smaller case, turn them into a cooperating individual, gain information, get these mid- and large-level drug dealers, then we're able to make more of an impact with one case. The case that we released this morning, this person has been looked at and we know is dealing drugs throughout the county. So now that this person is now incarcerated, we've been able to stop deliveries to a multitude of people throughout the county. So by taking a more aggressive approach towards the mid and the large level drug dealers, we're able to make a bigger impact. The second part of that is having a great relationship with our counterpoints in the federal court system with AUSA Scott Brady and his team. This year we were able to coordinate a couple federal roundups, which led to 24 individuals that were having significant drug dealings in our county are now being dealt with in the federal court. And what that allows is, in Pennsylvania, our sentence guidelines are certainly at one level. There's sentencing guide levels on a federal level, which provide for more incarceration. So those bigger drug dealers were able to get incarcerated for longer periods of time and to keep them from coming back on our streets quicker and just going right back to dealing drugs.
When it comes to drug investigations, one of the things that's always fascinated me is there really are 2 types that I think of. One is when a car gets pulled over for this violation or that, and inside the drugs are found, and nobody had any idea until this moment, and it just happened that you were able to catch somebody involved in the drug culture in that way. But the other is that whole undercover long-term investigation aspect of it, and the fact that you have to be very patient and make sure that everything is by the book so that if an investigation doesn't unravel because of a technicality, and that's very detailed work, is it not?
It's very detailed work, and it's very coordinated work. I take calls at any time, day or night. There's many times at 3 in the morning I'm speaking with an officer. And the idea is exactly what you said. We want to make sure we do it by the book. We want to make sure we do it right. We want to make sure that we want to put together, like pieces of a puzzle, a solid investigation so that when it comes time to either go into trial or if they're going to enter a guilty plea, we feel very confident in the charges that we brought forward. And what that does, really what that does is a couple things, is as more and more cases are coming down the road, defendants know that our task force and our officers are putting together good cases, and they're less likely to challenge them at trial.
When there is, I want to move on away from the drug investigations and into some other areas of your first year in office. When there is a new district attorney taking over and coming from private practice, there are quite often cases that are already in the system that typically the district attorney would handle, but that you have to hand off to other agencies simply because your law firm may have been involved with a client or somebody who is a part of a case, and that was the case in this past year. That transition is always going to happen, and when it does, it's going to be a little bit more complicated, and therefore maybe a delay in some of the court proceedings that we might expect to move through more quickly than they do.
Yeah, and that certainly happens. That happens anytime there's a new district attorney that comes from private practice. Any attorney needs to be looking at a case to determine if there's even an appearance of a conflict of interest. So that if a different attorney in my previous law firm had been involved in a case in really any manner, it's important that I simply move that case over to the Attorney General's office, even if I had no involvement in the case. The reason that that's important is we want to make sure that the community knows that as these cases are being prosecuted, they're being prosecuted fairly and without any leaning towards one side or the other. We want to make sure that everyone's able to look at our criminal justice system and believe that it's being worked through fairly and equally.
And would much of that also go back to the idea of making sure that all of the details are covered so that an attorney might discover something that is a part of a case that might change a ruling here or there, and therefore a conviction could be lost?
It certainly could. If we're going to go through the process of having a trial and having appeals, the last thing we want to do is that a victim feels like there's closure in a case because the case is going to trial and there is a verdict, and inadvertently the conviction's overturned because of some perceived conflict of interest that was overlooked. So we do take great care to try to find out all of those items so that any conviction that happens and when a victim's able to put a case to bed, it can be put to bed.
So I took you down a road there that maybe we weren't expecting to go down because I wanted to stay on the topic of some of your first-year highlights. What are some of the other things that stood out to you about this first year in office?
Well, one of the things that really stood out is, I came into office, and we have a great team here in the office, and the people we have here and the people we brought into the office, we have a really fantastic, hardworking team. One of the things that was important to me is that as cases are moved down the road, defendants are treated equally and fairly, so that if you have two defendants and factually their cases are similar, we should expect the same outcome. If we have 20 cases on DUI plea and sentence date, that we should really have a fair anticipation of what happens in those cases. Obviously not every case factually is the same as the others, but it's very important to me that as cases are going through, defendants are treated equally and fairly, independent of any information outside of their case. We're able to do that. I've had private conversations with defense counsel in our area who have said they enjoy that they typically know where a case is going to go. They know how a case is going to end up. And that's fair for a defendant who's going through it, somebody who's going through the criminal justice system, that perceives fair treatment is less likely to recidivate and commit further crimes down the road. When people feel like they're not being treated fairly, the effects of a sentence on reducing recidivism is less likely. So we've been able to create that situation where defendants in factually similar cases are treated fairly. Also, we had COVID 2 months in. Just as I'm still taking things out of a box and putting them in my office, we're shut down because of COVID. We work through that just like everybody in the world's working through that right now. And through this year, we were still able to complete 15 jury trials. And we were able to get through some very significant cases. Todd Walters and James Brown, Samir Alford, who was convicted and sentenced to 50 to 100 years incarceration for trying to kill 2 of our police officers, Dwight Bowen. I mean, we were able to really work through some very serious cases and some hard times. And that can only be done because, going back to that teamwork, our courts working very hard to make that happen, selecting juries at the KCAC and make that work here, our law enforcement putting these cases together, and the members of our community willing to come serve on juries and listen to our cases. So I think that we've gotten through some very serious and significant cases, and I look forward to doing the same this year.
I'm assuming that much of the staff that you work with have been there for a while, and therefore maybe the process of gaining your footing and starting forward might not have been as long as it could have been had they not had that sort of experience. Would that be the case?
Oh, absolutely. The staff that is still in my office that have been here for a while, been here for many years, and they're committed to the purpose of our office, which is justice and which is serving our victims. The new members of the office that came in from different areas were brought in for a very particular reason. They know what happens in the criminal justice system. They're committed to standing up for victims' rights. They're committed to the work. And it's not even just within my office. It is every office in this courthouse, the courts, the court administration, probation, everybody has been wonderful with helping to make that transition work well.
Much of what you do as a district attorney has to be in reaction to something else. For instance, a crime takes place, the DA is called in. Much of it has to do with preparation for what's going to be coming up in a courtroom or in an investigation. But when you think about your second year in office, which has now begun, are you able to set goals as an office or as a district attorney, or must it all be reactionary?
Well, obviously a lot is going to be reactionary just by how the criminal justice system is, but there are steps that I want to take in this coming year that I wish I was able to really work on last year, but hopefully this year we can get some footing. The Elder Abuse Task Force, which traditionally has had a once-a-year event, we're looking to find ways to reach out to our seniors and to provide information about scams or food insecurity issues or housing insecurity issues to reduce and prevent possible elder abuse. So our Elder Abuse Task Force is working on doing that through videos online and through building a network in which once we have information, we can quickly send it out and find all those hubs where our seniors go to, the fire halls in the churches that can help us present that information to help stop them from becoming victims of crimes. I want to utilize our drug task force to become stronger, have a stronger presence in our schools. I think if we invest in having those members in our schools and stopping kids, educating them about drugs and stopping them from even starting drugs, it's obviously a better return on your dollar and making their lives better and making our community better.
You are due in court in about 4.5 minutes, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. District Attorney Bob Manzi, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate your time.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM and AM 11.6.1 FM and AM 11.6.1 FM.